I finally finished reading every single story on Satori Reader, which is an app and website for learning to read Japanese, where you can click on every single word and get a definition, and also get detailed grammar explanations. Since I finally finished reading every single story on there, I figured it only made sense that I create a tier list and tell you which stories I thought were the best. And while I'm telling you which stories I think are best, I'm going to take you for a walk through my city, called Nagano, and I'll tell you why I'm doing that a little bit later. There is a reason for it, so stick around for that. I was going to categorize each of the videos based on their difficulty as well, but it turns out that they added that option since I thought of the idea for this video, so that's already available on the website. So instead, I'm just going to talk about which stories I thought were the best and which stories I thought were missing a little something. So the first story I want to talk about today is Kikimi Radio. Kikimi Radio was a really great story. I really enjoyed it. It's about this girl who gets a sort of magic radio, and I'm not going to give anything away, but I thought it was a really fun story. The only thing that I didn't like about it is that I thought it was way too short. Like, I would have loved to get into a little bit more detail on that radio and how it worked, and just had a few more little adventures with the main character. But it was a great story. But because I thought it was maybe a little bit too short, I'm gonna give that one a solid B, maybe an A-, but we're gonna drop it onto the B tier. The voice acting and sound effects for this one were also really great and really helped me to get into the story. So I definitely recommend using the audio for this one if you're gonna read through it. The next story I want to talk about is Hole in the Wall. It's a story about a mouse that can talk to this little elementary school student who's having troubles at school, and it's super cute. It's actually the first story I ever read on Satori Reader, which may be part of the reason that I like it so much, but I didn't have to look up much while I was going through it. You might not have the same experience, of course, but I just thought it was a really cute story, and I actually struggled between giving this one an A or an S rating, but I don't want to give too many stories S rank because then it'll kind of lose its meaning, so I'm going to give this one an A, I think. It could be an S, but it's a very solid A. Highly recommend this one. Check it out. The next one in the list is Akikos American Foreign Exchange, but I want to save that one for later, and you'll see why, so stick around for that. Also, if you haven't hit the like button yet, make sure you do that. It helps so much, really a lot, and even comments like bananas or I like bananas down in the chat, little stuff like that helps so much, so bananas in the comments. The next one I want to talk about is Sakura and Suzuki's long-distance relationship. Now, this story isn't really my type of story. It's sort of a romantic love story, but it's told through text messages, which was actually kind of cool. And what I thought was neat about it is there was tons of like informal language that you could use if you're maybe dating in Japan, or they could just use talking to friends and stuff if you're talking to Japanese people, which I thought was really cool. But the story, the type of story, it's not really my type, so I almost want to give it a D just because this is a very subjective thing, right? The tier list is subjective. If you want to make your own, I'm going to give you a link to the tier list down in the description, but on my list, I kind of want to give it a D, but the language was so helpful that I have to pop it up to a C. All right, so Sakura and Suzuki's long-distance relationship, that one's going on the C rank. The rest of the things in the easier section aren't actually stories, so we're not going to talk about those really, and we're going to move them into the not stories section. But I wanted to give Nutshell Grammar a bit of a shout out here. It's really, really cool if you're just getting started reading Japanese. Brian, the guy who created Satori Reader, is giving these really, really great grammar lessons here. The little short grammar lessons that have lots and lots of example sentences and can really help you get into the Japanese and help you find the grammar that you need to get through the stories in Satori Reader. So it's a great bridge for that. I also wanted to mention the meditation story here. It's not a story. The meditation instructions, all in Japanese, those are actually really cool because I always mention to people that they should try and pick like a new hobby in the language they're learning so that they can actually know more about the new hobby in the new language, like Japanese in this case, than they know in their own native language. It's actually really cool to have a hobby like that. For me, it was mountain climbing when I studied Japanese. I learned more about mountain climbing in Japanese than in English, so I could actually talk about it better in Japanese. And it's really cool to have something like that when you're just starting out. So I highly recommend checking out that one as well. The next one I want to talk about is the River Sanzu. It's about an accident that happens, and it's a really interesting sort of look into the afterlife. and I think it would have actually been a really great story as a tragedy, but I know a lot of people aren't into that. Maybe not everyone would have liked it if it was a tragedy. It was a great story for what it was. If you're not into tragedies, this one's a solid A, but I almost wonder, right, if this one couldn't have worked as more of a tragedy. I hope I'm not giving anything away with that, but anyway, I'm gonna give this one a solid B. Although it probably could have been an A, I'm not really sure. Either way, I really liked it. It could have been longer, that also might have pushed it up into the A category, but either way, solid B on this one. If you guys have been following me for a while, you know how much I love Satori Reader, which is why I'm super excited that they're sponsoring this video. Thank you so much, guys. If any of you are interested in checking out Satori Reader, there's a link down in the description, and there's a huge Black Friday sale going on right now, so make sure you check that out before it's too late. Alright, our next story is Okuniko. And it was one of the last stories I read on Satori Reader, and I really, really enjoyed it. It was a nice blend of like reality and fantasy, and I thought they did a great job with it. This one I'm gonna give a solid A, although I struggled. I almost wanted to put it on the S tier, but we're gonna go with A on this one. On to the next one. The Neighbor was a short, scary story that I almost thought could have gone full horror, but it was still pretty good. I'm not gonna give the plot away because it's super short. Check it out. I'm gonna give it a solid B. The next one we're going to talk about is Koibito. Now, this one really surprised me. I was not interested in the premise of this story at all, which is why it was one of the last stories I read. But it really surprised me, just like a lot of the stories on Satori Reader happen to do. This one's told from the perspective of two different characters who are having very different experiences of each other. It's a thriller, and I was on the edge of my seat for this whole thing. So if you're into thrillers, check this one out. This is the first story that's going to go up onto the S tier. The next story we're going to talk about is Konas Big Adventure. Now, this is the story of a black cat who goes on an adventure in the forest with a deer. And it's really fun, and I'm not going to spoil it, but I just want to tell you that this one is definitely, safely S tier. Alright, now we're going to move on to the harder stories in Satori Reader, and the first one at the top of the list is Fujiki. It's a new story that just came out. There's only one episode at the time I'm recording this, and it's about a supernatural consulting service, which I don't really think you can go wrong with. I think it has a potential to be S tier, definitely, but since there's only one story so far, I think it's too soon to tell, so I'm just going to drop it on the A tier just to be safe. Say hello. The next story we're going to talk about is Konas Big Adventure 2. This continues the Konas Big Adventure 1 story, but she's 8 years older, or is it he? I can't remember. But anyway, they're 8 years older, and it's a much more advanced story. The language is more advanced, the content is more advanced and a little heavier, and it's really good, but it's still not even halfway through the story yet, I don't think, so we're going to put this one on the A tier, and I'm going to assume it's going to move up to S eventually, but we'll see. The next one we're going to talk about is the story called Secret. Now, I really wanted to like this one, I really did, but there were just too many major plot points that seemed to pop out of nowhere, and little things that just didn't really make sense or seemed unnecessary, and I just couldn't get into it for some reason. Even though there were some parts I really liked, and I thought a lot of the language was great for if you're into detective stories or anything like that, thrillers, drama, stuff, there was too many weird things going on, and I just couldn't get into it. So I'm gonna put this one on the D. Maybe it's the first time that they ever had a story that had so many moving parts in it and they just couldn't put it together or pull it off, but I still thought it was an okay story, but it's the first one that I'm gonna drop onto the D tier list. Sorry, guys. The next story we're going to talk about is My Sweetie is Japanese. For some reason, I always want to say My Sweetie is Japanesey on this one, but it's not the point. This story wasn't really my type of story, but there was actually so much good vocabulary if you ever plan on moving to Japan or if you want to get married in Japan, and a lot of the stories felt like they were taken directly from my life, which was kind of trippy actually. I was originally going to put this one on the C tier, but just because there were so many cool stories that were directly from my life, so if you're not living in Japan, it really can give you kind of an idea of what it's like to have a family over here. I decided to pop it up onto the B rank. That brings us to the last 4 stories. If you've come this far and you haven't hit the like button yet, please consider doing it. It helps a lot. By the way, what's your favorite Japanese story that you've read so far? Let me know down in the comments. Next we have some documentaries. These are some cool little stories about things that actually happened in Japan and were big news at the time, and one about an organization in the United States that's trying to get the belongings of fallen soldiers back to their families in Japan. That one's called Obon Society, and it was really touching. In fact, I almost actually cried during a few episodes. The language is quite difficult, but if you ever intend on taking N2 or N1 or reading any newspapers, I think that this one and all of the ones in this documentary series are going to be necessary reading. The next one in the documentary series is one called After the Tokyo Subway Attacks, and it's some pretty heavy stuff. It's about some terror attacks that happened on the subway in Tokyo by this cult that was popular in Japan, I guess, for a little while. And it's pretty heavy stuff, but the vocabulary is very useful if you're ever going to plan on reading newspapers or anything. If you're going for N1, it's very difficult and heavy content, but pretty useful, I think. So this one could be an A, but I think we're gonna pop it onto the B category. The last one in our documentary series is called the Zama9 Murders, and this one was really heavy. I almost got sick a few times reading this one, but it's very useful language if you're ever going to be reading newspapers, and even though it's probably not for everyone, it's a bit heavy. It's about a serial killer who was really big news here in Japan 3 or 4 years ago, and yeah, if you're into that, you're going to be into it. If you're not, you're definitely not going to be into it. But anyway, this one as well could be an A, but I think we're going to pop it onto the B tier, even though it was very good reporting. So we finally got to the place I've been trying to get to the whole time, and the reason I've been trying to get here is because I have access to the final episodes of Akiko no Nikki, or Akiko's American Foreign Exchange, and I wanted to listen to them in a really cool place. I didn't just want to listen to them at my desk at home or anything. I wanted to listen to them somewhere really majestic, and I think you'll probably agree that this place fits the bill. Akiko's American Exchange starts out as a journal of a girl who's on a foreign exchange trip to America, but it sort of morphs into a novel that just has a lot of fun twists and turns, ties together stories on Satori Reader really well, and is just really well executed, and I really enjoyed it way more than I expected. I did not expect to enjoy this story at all, which is why I actually started reading it first, but just as it morphed and as the story developed, I found that I was having more and more fun reading it, and now that I've seen the ending, I have to tell you, I definitely picked the right place for it. Super cool story. Thank you guys for letting me check it out, and I hope that the rest of you enjoy it if you ever read to the very end, as much as I did. This one is, without a doubt, S tier. Remember, if you're interested in Satori Reader and want to check it out, there's a link down in the description, and there's a huge sale going on right now for Black Friday. If it's not Black Friday anymore, there's still a sale if you click on the link down in the description. It's not an affiliate link, but it will get you the discount. Thanks so much to Satori Reader for sponsoring this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye!